A heart is not judged by how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. That is my definition of love. Theater is a temple, and do not disgrace it. That's that experience, that religious experience of being able to communicate in a sacred ground. So when you walk into a theater, I bless it. What are you afraid of? What's your fear? I'm not going to get the job. I'm not going to get this done. I'm not going to succeed, whatever. And you have to just come to peace with that fear, you know? So that's what music is for me. I hear the dance and see the music, or I see the music and hear the dance. When we were able to go bipedal, you know what I mean? Getting up on 2 feet and sort of walking, shooting, you know, arrows. That somebody took 2 sticks together and started to hit them together, music was born. And usually what happened was that was to summon us to a space, to center around most likely a fire, to celebrate something. Storytelling is a connection of mind, body, and spirit. And when that, you know, trifecta comes together, that is the soul.
Hello everybody, I'm Guillermo Iván, and I want to welcome you again to a new episode of Coffee, Matcha, and Soul. I'm here with my friends and colleagues Saro Varjabedian and Zair Montes, and we have a special guest today that, besides being an incredible human being, it's a remarkable professional in our industry. His name is Jonathan Stuart Cerullo. He is a director, he's an award-winning director, choreographer, dramaturgist, and executive producer and president at JSC Theatricals. He is being part of many productions on Broadway, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, regional theater, international tours, television, and film for over 40 years. Jonathan, welcome here. So first things first, what was your preference? Coffee or matcha?
Coffee. Sorry.
So we're even on this one.
Good. Sorry. And it was, and actually it was, what was this? What did you make me here? You made
cappuccino. Yes,
Thank you so much. Yes.
How is it?
Delicious.
Yeah?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good.
When I was in Italy, I know you used to have espresso, but I want to be cappuccino all the time. So thank you. Nice to meet everybody.
Well, speaking of Italy, I know that you have Italian background, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
We'll start off there. So I was on scholarship to study the Italian Renaissance in Florence, Italy, for my junior year in school. And while I was there, my grandmother said to me, "Why don't I come over and I'll visit you and we'll go up to Milan because I want to, you know, show you around." I was like, "Sure, why not?" So I traveled from Rome up to Milan to meet her. We were there for 2 or 3 days. And we're standing outside of La Scala, the famous opera house, and it was closed. It was off season. I said, "Nani, we can't get in here." And she says, "Yes, we can." So we were invited into the scholars' library, which only scholars are permitted to go into to study the manuscripts of, you know, famous composers and all of this. And she's in the corner talking to some very dignified men in suits and nice. And there's this huge book open on this oak table, this long oak table, like a library. And I'm looking down at this book and I said, "Nani, isn't this your maiden name? Isn't this?" And she turns to me and she goes, "That's what we're here for."
Oh, wow.
So I am a direct descendant of Ermina Prezzolini, who was one of La Scala's prima donna opera singers.
Wow.
And Verdi wrote not 1, but 2 operas for her, Il Lombardi and Joan of Arc.
Wow.
And she was reportedly having an affair with Giuseppe Verdi, who was married at the time, but she helped him with his political aspirations. So Il Lombardi has an interesting story to it. By Roman law, you are not allowed to put any Catholic or religious song in an opera. You couldn't do it. Only stayed in the church. And Verdi wrote the Ave Maria in it. And the police said, "Nope, cannot do this. It is verboten. You cannot perform this." So he went screw you. And he turned the song into Slave Maria, the slave of Maria. And it was interpreted into the show. So when I realized this, I turned to my grandmother and I said, Nani, this makes perfect sense for me. I'm studying theater in America, musical theater, Broadway. Every time I walked into your home, there was opera playing in your home. Your family is always so creative. It just sort of crystallized for me as an adult. Why I'm doing what I'm doing, and we kind of talked a little bit of. I do believe that this woman's soul is reincarnated in me in some small way, shape, or form. So that's my ancestral roots. And most recently, I went back to visit her hometown. There's a square named after her. She was quite prominent. There's a statue of her. There is a vocal competition in Italy for a mezzo soprano that has received an award that they give her. There's even a street in Rome named after her. So she was quite a big deal. And I was like, this makes perfect sense that I am more so on my mother's side of the family, which is this. This is the track than my father's side. I've always felt closer to them and just familia, as we would say. And this sort of all put it together. I'll tell you something interesting too. When I went to the town that they were born in, Anguillara Sabazia, which is right on Lake Bracciano, about 40 minutes outside of Rome, our guide takes us to the square that is named after them. And it's on this house. And he goes, well, this is the house your great-great-grandfather was born in.
Wow.
So I'm touching the house, just trying to observe. And the door to the house opens. And this person steps out wanting to know what the heck I was doing touching his house. And when I told him, the story my friend was able to interpret for us, he was just very impressed with it. And I was kind of hoping he'd let me go inside, but that wasn't going to happen.
So how is your, what's your definition of reincarnation? Because you mentioned that word before, and I'm curious.
I feel that an artist's soul gets passed down from one generation to the next, from one person to the next. There will be another person. There will be another Jonathan coming in the world. There'll be another Guillermo. There'll be another one of us coming in the world at some point in time. I feel that is definitely a track that I respect totally. Yeah, that's why I feel.
So do you think that soul is aware that he's coming back to impersonate this new body, but that his soul is, or to embody? I don't know, how would you?
Yeah, I wouldn't say impersonate. I think embody would be more apropos. I am sensitive to music. I'm sensitive to opera. I'm sensitive to musical theater. There's no other explanation on the earth that could tell you why. So if I had to go back generations, that's the why right there. I don't know what she feels or is feeling. But I know what I am feeling, and so I'm assuming that she's comfortable with that, wherever she may be at her resting place. But I think it's embodying a soul that, gets just the transcend. Artists are very special people.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is, but I just feel that artist souls do get passed down generationally, whether it's this decade or the next century or something. There will be another filmmaker out there. There'll be another, actor out there. It's not going to stop. So, for me, that was it specific.
So, Jonathan, to give our audience some context, because we're getting into the soul and possibly reincarnation. But first, I would love to know, your journey and how you found your art. When did that happen for you? Was it
absolutely.
You were born and you knew that theater was going to be the path for you, or did it evolve?
So at said grandmother's house that had the opera going every minute of the day, she had a little birthday party for my cousin. And in the birthday party, there was a marionette show. She hired people and it was a circus of all things. And I remember very clearly getting up from the couch, wondering, how are those little puppets being manipulated? And I peeked behind the curtain to see the puppeteers, the marionettes. So I didn't know it at that time, but that was my first inkling into the idea of who controls what goes on stage. I am now a professional director, so you make the connection there.
How old were you?
Yeah.
Oh, I was probably 6 or 7 years old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I can see it like it was yesterday. And the guy looked at me like, get out. And I was like, no, I'm looking at what's going on. How are you doing that stuff, you know? And so I looked at that moment and went, oh, okay, that may have been an inkling that I wanted to control what was going on the stage in a proscenium. I ended up directing the circus too, by the way. So that was fun.
Then where did your...
So after that, I was sitting with my family, and we had gone to the opening of the newly opened Vivian Beaumont Theater at Lincoln Center, brand new theater. And I was watching the transfer of the original Broadway production of Man of La Mancha with Richard Kiley, Robert Rounsville, and Joan Diener, the original cast. I remember nothing up until the point when Quixote sings Impossible Dream. And what I now know today is a mirrored ball. The theater at one point just lit up with all these stars, and they were just revolving. And I was like, how did that happen? And I turned to my father and grabbed his arm to ask him. And it was the first time I saw my father crying. So I looked back on that stage and I went, can that do that? And I went, and I never looked back. So that was my definitive moment of understanding.
How old were you?
I was 10, 11 years old. So yeah, so that was it. That was the defining moment. And anything that had to do with theater, puppets, lighting, Fred Astaire, whatever, that was my vitamins.
And then what happened from there, from that kid, 10 years old, seeing this, witnessing this beauty, to Jonathan today? What happened?
So I went to school, high school in Westchester County, and there was a gentleman there, Gene Bissell was his name. And I don't know if you know who Peter Gallagher, the actor Peter Gallagher. Peter Gallagher is a graduate of Byram Hills High School, and Gene Bissell was the director of the theater program. And he put on top-notch theater shows because he was from New York. He was a lyricist, composer in New York City, did Leonard Sillman's New Faces and a lot of reviews. Goes into high school, teaches, and does these very professional, brings in choreographers, brings in set designers. So it was like, this is a really high-end, theater program. And I wanted to be in that program like it was nobody's business because Peter Gallagher was in it. And Peter was, played all the romantic leads. And I thought, I want to do that. So that's what happened. And I was actually the first student that the high school awarded a scholarship to go on to college, which I was already going to do. But yeah, my first show was Gypsy.
Wow.
Yeah, I played. Okay, let me see. Can I tell you this story? Do you have 2
Of
seconds to tell you the story?
Yes, you can tell
So,
it.
like, I was hungry. Like, I could taste that. I wanted to be told. I don't know if you know the show Gypsy.
Yeah.
Tulsa, the dancing. I wanted to be Tulsa and get out of my way. So I go, and the cast list is posted on the chorus call board, and I look down the list. And, I'm not there. My name isn't there. I was so disappointed. I walk out of the chorus room and I smack dab into Mr. Bissell. And he says, what are you so upset for? I said, I didn't make the show. And he looks and he says, I think you need to go back in and look at that cast list again. So I ran back in there and I scoured the very bottom of the cast list. At the very last line in the listing was Caroline the Cow. Jonathan Cerullo. I still have the tail to this day. Yeah, so I come from humble beginnings, I tell you that. Yeah. I ended up becoming president of the stage club and all of this. Yeah, so I was in it, and I was in it deeply, So that was it. And I got the opportunity to go to Emerson College in Boston and received my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Directing with minors in photography and English and dance. So, and then I actually had a job before I got out of school at a very well-known regional theater, the Arena Stage in Washington, D.C., where I was assistant director on the musical Candide. And that was it. I got my equity card.
Wow.
And I never stopped working, thank God.
Wonderful.
And then from there to New York, what?
Well, I came, because I grew up in New York, I just came back to New York. Everyone was like, oh, we're going to New York. I said, I'm going back to New York. That's where my family is. I don't know, they're all within spitting distance of, my apartment. So, yeah, I came right back to the city. And I literally spent about 2 years, just training myself and figuring out what the New York market was like, because it's intense.
Yeah.
It is intense, as I need not tell any of you.
Yeah.
And I realized if I'm going to compete in this field in musical theater and Broadway, I better get my act together. And I just put head down, I studied, like I can't even begin to tell you. And I started to get, better and better and better and better. And then I got a big show, and that was it. I was, I was part of this musical called Cats. I don't know if you may have heard of it.
Yes,
but
this little musical.
this little tiny musical, yeah. And I was told that for our company, I did the national tour, and I learned this years later. They said, "Oh yeah, we auditioned over 2,000 people for this, and we went to New York, Los Angeles, Canada." I was like, Chicago. I was like, I didn't know you did any of that, and I was chosen. So I thought, wow. So in the trajectory of Cats, there was the London production, there was the Broadway production, there was the Los Angeles production, then there was my production. So I was the fourth actor to play the role of Skimbleshanks, to which my mother would always say, well, at least you made the top 5. So yeah, so there you go.
And Jonathan, you have such an illustrious career over.
It's kept me alive.
Yeah. Could you tell us, when did you move back to New York and start, just roughly, just so we have
I literally moved back to New York after I graduated from Emerson.
But we're talking about the 70s?
Oh,
80s?
no, not that. Yeah, not that. I graduated from Emerson in 82, so I came back right at 82.
Okay.
And it was the height of the AIDS, epidemic, and so that was also another thing to have to contend with, Here you are young and, trying to figure things out, and you had your colleagues just dying all around you. It was horrifying.
Could you say, because I'm familiar with it, but I don't know exact years. I'm sure younger audiences would love to know. So the AIDS epidemic started 80?
Right around 1980, 81, 82. I'm sure you could research this and be totally accurate with it. And this was the time that I was now becoming, involved in these big shows. And it was interesting, too. We would come into work, and there'd be a notice on the call board that says, oh, so-and-so isn't in today. Okay. And then you come in 3 days later, and that person had passed away. And I was like,
wow.
Wait a second, what? It was just here 4 days ago. What?
Wow.
So we had a lot of that to have to contend with. And I just was reminded that the person who covered me, I had 3 covers, in the show. People, when I stepped out, they stepped in. I was just reminded of his passing today, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
So it was a horrifying time period. Really not good.
Yeah.
So I thank my blessings that I'm here.
Of course. And did you feel, and I'm sorry, Guy.
Yeah, go for it.
Just since we're on the topic, did you find it like a parallel to that time with the AIDS pandemic and now with the COVID pandemic?
I did.
Being that you lived through.
I couldn't help but think, God, if they only knew what we actually did go through back in the early 80s. And with this unprecedented, I hadn't come across this kind of a situation where in the AIDS epidemic, you didn't necessarily have to be quarantined. They didn't know how it was, how the disease was transmitted.
Right.
But here you had to be quarantined because it was airborne.
Right.
And that made the shift in the dynamic a lot more threatening, I think. And so, I thought, wow, I've got to quarantine, and for what? But more than that, it brought the theater to a screeching halt. The theater was the first place to close and the last place to open. So I thought, okay, now what do I do?
So during the AIDS pandemic, that never happened?
No, you could still work.
The show must go on
Correct.
till the end.
Yeah. Which is a circus phrase, the show must go
Mm-hmm.
on. The idea that you could go into work because it wasn't an airborne illness, it was a physically transmitted, sexually transmitted disease. You lived like a nun for a couple of years, But here, it was different. It was airborne, and they didn't understand it, and people were going down and going down fast. And so that was the biggest difference for
like going back to the AIDS pandemic, I've heard that early on, like you wouldn't even know if a hug would transmit the disease, and if you're in the theater play, like you're so how were you?
That was challenging because we had to understand. We were, I was doing Cats at the time, and I was sweating. We were dancing 3 hours a night.
Yeah.
We were sweating, and our sweat would fly off. And I thought, wait a second, is this? How is it this? So we actually had a physician come in and talk to us about it, and say that and explain how this disease was transmitted.
Wow.
So it was all questionable at that time. But gosh, yeah, people dropped. I got so tired of going to memorials, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, but it was just really challenging. And Broadway Cares was, born out. I don't know if you're familiar with Broadway Cares, Equity by Faith. That was born out of that period, which is still thriving right now. Yeah. So, yeah.
Jonathan,
Yes.
I remember when I met you, one of the things that felt fascinated about you was the fact that you really care about the human connection. I remember you speaking and saying,
I open my loud mouth. I have my big mouth. Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to work with people. If I have the chance, I don't want to work with people I don't connect, I don't have love, or I don't feel love for.
Yes.
So in that regard, I wanna ask you 3 questions. The first one, what is love?
What is love? It's
What is
ineffable.
love?
It is ineffable. It means something to each one of us has a different.
For you, what is love?
I can only quote what the Professor Marvel said to the Tin Man when he handed him his heart. And he said, a heart is not judged by how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. Think about it. A heart is not judged by how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. That is my definition of love.
And through your work, has that definition been evolving over the course of the years? Not just your work, but your life. Is it different now than what it used to be 20, 30 years ago?
Sure, I'm a different person than I was 20 years ago. Different circumstances, different people in my life, different ambitions now. I've achieved certain things that I don't need to go back to do, because what do you call that?
Check.
Yeah, check the box off. And there's new boxes that I want to, fill out. Yeah. And my life is becoming more important in not so much professionally, but personally, with relationships, with taking care of people, and my priorities have shifted. So when you tell me, you can't, get the next show, I'm like, it's not about the next show, actually. It's about, how did you take care of somebody today, or did you help somebody today, or did you make somebody laugh today? I mean, that's to me that's my mantra. I wake up in the morning, I say thank you to whom it may concern. I hope it makes someone smile today. That's what I do. So so it does change. But in my professional career, the theater, and I go back to my education on this. My professor, Leo Nicolaitis is his name, a Greek guy. He said, so you all must understand something here. The theater is a temple, and do not disgrace it. I was like, the theater's a temple? Wow. 5, 6, 7, 8. The theater's dancing and singing. And then I'm standing at the top of the Theater of Dionysus in Greece, and all the folks are down there, and you could hear them. I was like, oh my God, you can hear them talking like this. And this wind sort of came over me, and I was like, oh, that's that experience, that religious experience of being able to communicate in a sacred ground. So for me, when you walk into a theater, I bless it. My rehearsal space, I bless it. And anything that comes into that is not going to have that, DNA, I guess you want to call it, that's what, I can smell it a mile away. Yeah. And you know what? I say to that person, what are you afraid of? What's your fear? Because you're motivated by fear mostly, I'm not going to get the job, I'm not going to get this done, I'm not going to succeed, whatever. And you have to just come to peace with that fear, and but there are some people then that are just plain toxic, if you know what I mean. And so, but
here's the next question: what is music?
Oh, well, can I relate it to dance? Because as George Balanchine once said, and I quote those people who are much smarter than me, because I sort of lived through these wonderful ideas. He goes, I see the dance and hear the I hear the dance and see the music. So that's what music is for me. I hear the dance and see the music, or I see the music and hear the dance. And so when I listen to a piece of music, there is something that goes into the little theater in my brain that unfortunately it just gets translated into three-dimensional space and people moving within that space. And that's what it means to me. It is the only thing that actually joins all humanity, because when we were able to go bipedal, you know what I mean, getting up on 2 feet and started walking, shooting arrows, that somebody took two sticks together and started to hit them together, music was born. And usually what happened was that was to summon us to a space, to center around most likely a fire, to celebrate something, storytelling, tomorrow's hunt, or we came back from the hunt, or marriage or something. And so those two sticks that banged together was the beginning of music. And there's not one culture in this universe that does not have that as its as one of its foundations. Not one culture. Not one. So that is universal for all of us. So yeah, music is universal.
Next question. What is freedom?
Oh boy, what is freedom? I think I know what the generic term of freedom is, but I'm not sure I know we're living within a free society at this current moment, with what is happening, which is very distressing to me, I'm sure, hopefully to your readers or listeners as well. But freedom is a notion. And I only say that because there's a song, Freedom is an Ocean, Sweeping the Nation. Freedom's in the state of all mankind. So, and I don't know the rest of the lyric, you'll have to forgive me, but yeah, it's a notion. It's what makes you free. I understand that I'm able to have free speech and express myself in that regard. We hope that that's going to stay with us, because it is being threatened right now, as we all know. At least I feel it is. But yeah, the ability to be able to do that. And I'm grateful that I live in New York, where I'm sort of insulating myself with creative persons and artists and all of that. I don't want to necessarily think that I'm going to stick my head in the sand, but yeah, I am, with the noise that I can hear out there. Because I don't want to get stressed out again. I can't. Not with the responsibility I have with taking care of David and what I have to do for myself and where I'm at in my life.
So how's been your professional career can be ironically very stressful.
Oh yeah.
And at the same time we're artists. So we are not like anybody's lives is in our hands. So we Right. So how do you has there been any transition in between the way you used to handle your stress and situations to now, and what can you teach us about that process?
It's interesting. Thank you for that. That's great because when I was younger, I handled things perhaps in ways that I look back now and go, why did you do that? Why did you handle that way? And now David brings me to a place of reality. And when I tell him something that's stressing me out, he goes, really? Nobody cares. And I go, you know what? You're right. Nobody really cares.
But people should care.
Yes, they should care. But at the end of the day, they don't.
Of course.
You know, and if you get the job done and you do it to their satisfaction, then that's
absolutely.
the result that happens. But I used to get all tensed up and I go, now, breathe. Understand what the complexity of the situation is. Why did that not? When I said to you, I would like an orange ball to come back into rehearsal, and you bring back a screen cube, instead of me going, "Why?" I go, "Now tell me why you made that choice." So I come back to them to say, "Let me invite you into the process here, because this is what I asked for, but this is what you brought back. So tell me why you thought that." And now let's give them the opportunity to explain that. And at the end of the day, as the director in the room, I do win out, you know, because I needed the green ball. But as before, I would have slammed them down and said, "You see, you ignorant." I can't do that anymore. They had the choice. They made a choice. And I need to understand what their thought process is on making that choice and respect them and say, "This is nice, but thank you. I would like to have a green ball in the room." So, but that's the difference. I would have nailed them to the wall.
Have that openness put you in situations where you have said, you know what, I like that idea better than mine?
Absolutely. If you have a better idea in the room, speak out. Speak out. One of my favorite phrases to say in a room when somebody comes up with a much better idea than me is like, "I am so glad I thought of that." You know, and that's to tell you, good work, you know, And that gets incorporated into the process, you know. That's that's your intellectual property. That's your thoughts, you know. I can't go into the confines of your mind unless you express them to me. And when you do, everything's on the table, you know. At the end of the day, as a director, you've got to make a choice, right? Somebody has to make a choice. Otherwise, you're going to wallow in, you know, and waste somebody's money. And so you have to make a choice. So, but I'm open more now to understanding different choices, as opposed to 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I would have been like, I can't do that.
Jonathan, can I ask you? So, were you
go for it? No.
I love what you said about theater is a temple, and you started to talk about that connection between, because you heard the audience, and somehow that connection between the stage and the audience almost, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that something spiritual to you?
Yes.
And if it is, if the theater is a temple, what is it? What does it do for
There's this
humanity?
There's this ineffable space. You know what I mean by ineffable? It's like, I can't explain it. Between the person who's saying the line and the person who's receiving the line. There's that space right there that is magical. I can control this, but I can't control this.
Right.
And so that reciprocity of going back and forth is something that we all try to achieve with you know, greatness. But that to me is that's the spiritual moment. I can't tell you what happens between there and there.
And it's about that connection, and it's about how the material, the performances impact the audience and shape them.
First and foremost, as you all know, you've got to have a good script. If it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage, as they say. And the best material can sometimes fall flat, as you well know. And some of the most enriched material can, you know, be difficult to absorb. But so the writing is for me everything. And so I work very closely with writers to understand. I worked with a very famous woman. Her name is Uta Hagen. I don't know if you know who Uta Hagen is. Do you know Uta?
Well, we talk about HB Studio. I went to HB. Remember, we had
so you
that
know Uta Hagen?
conversation. Yes.
Oh, I worked with a lady.
Yeah. I remember you telling me the story. Share this story because it's
Did I tell you with the notebook?
You told me about going to her
Get a
place.
load of this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I went. So, first of all, I was asked to direct her gala tribute, and every celebrity and star was at this thing, and there I was, shoving people on stage. Anyway, I was then hired to help her do her last play that she did out in Los Angeles called 6 Dance Lessons in 6 weeks, and I was to prepare her with all the dancing. So I'm in the studio with her, and we got really close, and she's smoking her cigarettes and all that. And she says, Jonathan, I got to ask you a question. She opens the script up and she has every single line numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, on right-hand margin. And then she had an old spiral notebook, and the same page 7, all. And on every single line, there was some thought process that she had written down. And she said to me, Jonathan, do you think that this comma is in the right place here? And I stopped and I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is this comma in the right place? And it was at that moment that I really, really understood the roadmap of a script. And when I work with a playwright or what have you, I stop at they hate me, I stop at every single solitary word and say, why did you write that word? Why did you put that comma there? Why is it an exclamation point? Why is it 2 exclamation points? Because that's my roadmap.
Yeah.
That's we're all going to interpret that for you. And if it isn't solid, then it's not going to happen. But yeah, when I first met her, and when I knocked on her door, and she opened the door, she goes, "You must be Jonathan Cerullo." And I said, "And you are no doubt Uta Hagen." So we had a great time. Yeah, it was terrific. But that made me understand.
And you told me that you used to go to her plays for a year. You were
well, it was a couple of months actually that we were there, and I was putting a retrospect together of her life for this benefit. So it was honoring her 50 plus years in the business. And I said, so Uta, I'm sure you got like some notebooks or some scripts or something around. She goes, follow me. She opens this door and it was like a hoarder. It was just piled up to the ceiling with all these boxes and books and notebooks. And she goes, have fun. I said, what is this? She goes, that's my life. Wow. And I started to just pull, and I was opening, scripts to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with her original notes on it, or, different things that she had with the studio, HB studio. So, yeah, I was blessed with that. Totally blessed with that.
An incredible
experience. And at one moment in time, I'm thinking to myself, because I was teaching her how to do like a tango and a foxtrot and all that. And I thought to myself, I am now teaching the master teacher how to do this. Who am I to do this with her? But yeah, it was so great. I loved it.
I want to ask you something, and this is something that I wanted to ask you from the
I hope that answers your question as to what happens between that space.
That connection.
I can't tell you what happens. It's that ineffable moment, And if you've got a good script and you have a good actor and you've done your homework and you resonate that, it will have an effect on the audience. And I can't dictate what that effect is. So.
But there's something in the power of that effect, which is what makes it a spiritual connection almost.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. Yeah, I think so. Anyway.
So I want to tap into dancing.
Yes.
And because I know you have a very successful career as a dancer and choreographer as well. Yeah. And I love dancing salsa. And I feel something very unique when I'm dancing. And the way you phrase music was incredible when you said, I listened to the dancing
I hear the dance. I see the music and hear the dance. That's not mine. That's
but that's a beautiful definition, because
excuse me.
What do you think happens within the body and the mind when we hear the music?
Yeah, there's a physiological relationship that happens when you hear music. It elevates hormones. It elevates things in your body. I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you exactly what it is. The musicologists will be able to pinpoint this to you, but music heightens something within your own sensibility of your own, tonality. We all have tones in us, and we all have, rhythms that we're working with. And when you hear something, I'm telling you, when I'm depressed, I know this is going to sound really cliche, and I don't want to do the business anymore, I put on a soundtrack to a musical. And I just listen to it, and I get so emotionally connected to it. I start, I go, what, and give this up? No, can't do it. Can't do it. So, it's something different for each of us. I keep coming back to the word effable, ineffable. It's like I would be, another quote, I would be a fool to try to tell you why. Wise men never try, so.
Because it's interesting that you brought this up about, and I'm going to bring it back to the reincarnation and just thinking about like how you were born and theater spoke to you, music speaks to you. Do you think that that this is like people, like your talent, that people are born with certain talents, and it's whether it's genetic or reincarnation, it's just like this is like,
that's a really
right?
good
'Cause that's
question.
like we're talking about now the individual, and everyone's different, right? And everyone, but obviously you must have had a talent for dance and music and theater that drew, like you were born for it almost, right?
I think that there is some truth to that. Yes. You can learn the craft. I can't teach you talent, but you can learn the craft. Yeah, I can tell you what upstage and downstage means. I can tell you how to make I can, that's craft, What is it to actually articulate that note? How do you formulate that note on that particular word? That's the craft of it. But the talent of that's something I would never touch. And yet I can spot it like that, and here in New York, there are so many talented artists, so many. You have a plethora to choose from. And for me, what it comes down to when I'm casting something is who you are as a person. And I'll always ask the question that is actually asked in a chorus line, which is very smart. Tell me something that's not on your resume. What is it that you do that makes you get up in the morning? Do you like to make, paper flowers? Do you like to knit? Do you like to garden? Because that to me is more interesting than you being able to hit an A flat or an E flat on a specific note. That can be done by almost anyone. But when you start to say, what is your love of gardening? And what is it that makes that interesting to you? That to me then starts a creative relationship that you can't destroy. It'll become really fruitful and powerful. To say, how do you want to take this note? What is it? What flower is that note?
Wow.
Wow, that's a beautiful
It's
thing.
interesting. Would you be offended if we took that and asked you that right now? What do you wake up thinking about or wanting to do first thing in the morning? What's not on your resume? So we learn a little bit about you. Is that okay if we ask
I
that
will
back?
tell you, if I were to put theater down today, there's this beautiful instrument that I have that I can have at the end of my hand, which is my Nikon camera, and I can photograph.
Okay.
And to me, there's nothing. There's that I could give it up in a heartbeat and take on what I do as a photographer. I've been recognized as a photographer. I've won an award. I used to have my own studio actually, but when I go on a trip, one of the things I want to do is I want to go, how am I going to photograph this? And when I went to Italy, I said, I want to do Fellini. I want to be Fellini.
Okay.
So I went and looked and photographed. I took over 1,000 photographs, and I've just edited those down to 700. And now I'm looking at them going, what would Fellini do here? How would Fellini make that shot? How do I edit it? And so I do what we used to do in a dark room. Remember? With the film things and the water baths and all that stuff. I now we do it digitally now. So I spend countless hours doing that. So I would be more than happy to put a retrospect of my work together and
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. And it's interesting.
My language.
It's hello, thank you. Yeah. Well, you've got a frame, you're looking at it, you're looking through a frame.
Yeah.
And like you said, there was something on the floor over here.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I got the whole space in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So anyway.
What brings joy to your life, Jonathan, every day? And what is joy?
Oh my God, waking up in the morning, I think is the first answer I would tell you. I don't take that for granted.
Yeah.
And I honestly do say, thank you to whom it may concern. Thank you for getting me up. I do hope I make somebody smile today or laugh or whatever. What brings me joy? Good work brings me joy that I do and that we all do collectively. That brings me joy. Yeah, I guess that.
So I think you mentioned something in our previous conversation that nothing is a coincidence or something like that.
Oh yes, right. There's no mistakes
There's
in the world.
no mistakes. Okay, yeah. I want to hear more about it because
I'll bring something very, very close to where there's no mistakes in the world, and he's sitting across from me. So when the universe speaks, you better be fertile to hear it come back to you. So we're in this apartment on the east side, very beautiful apartment, and the host has us go around and talk about who we are and etc. And I said, in all the years I've been doing this, no one has ever had this forum. No one. And we started to really break apart some of the conversations. And I said, there will be nothing that will ever take. Theater has lasted centuries. It's going to continue to last centuries. It's not going away. Unless the world blows up, this is not going to go away. And this one over here says, I hear you. I understand that. And he goes, there's nothing that will ever replace that one-on-one conversation. I went, and who are you? So I went up and had a coffee in my hand. And I said, we started chit-chatting and what have you. And I said, so where are you from? And he says, Cuba. And I went, oh, well, I'm working on a project about Tropicana nightclub. And that's when the universe spoke. So all of a sudden, that was so not planned, but predetermined by a higher space. And he said, oh, I like the salsa. And I was like, guess what? I'm doing this project. And the next thing you know, we are now sitting down tomorrow with the author of that particular book, that Tropicana Nights, that I was referring to. And, we're seeing what can be created from an absolutely unsolicited, unpredicted, and so when he said that happened and that happened, and I went, boom.
So I get that point, especially when it's like something cool happening, right? But is that phrase still working for you if the coincidence or moments are not the best ones, but they would be, so to speak, negative ones, like?
I'm grateful to say there aren't a lot of negative energies that are in my life per se. I'm grateful that way, that I don't, toxicity doesn't last very long. I get frustrated at times, when I see things that I wish I could fix, especially with, someone who's not feeling well. I wish I could, pull something out and say, throw it away. And I question the higher spirit.
Yeah, you mentioned the higher spirit for the serendipity of you, like an incense. But and we like cheer that high, energy or God for when good things happen. But when bad things happen, we question. So what about the mistakes? There are no mistakes in there? How do you navigate on those
mistakes
concepts?
Are just a different creative way of looking at something, in my opinion. That's the way I look at a mistake. I saw that on a bus stop once. A mistake is just a different creative way of looking at something. So I kind of live with that. But yeah, I think what frustrates me is and I was asked this question actually, if I were to, fix something in the world, what would I fix? And that would be to eliminate the world of cancer. It's hideous. And so, yeah, I get frustrated and I go, well, if you have such good things in the world, why do you have this, dear God?
Right.
Really, what is this to teach me?
Mm.
And, you know, my partner's name is David, and we've been 15 years together. And I realized that this was my purpose. And the Bible tells me that, actually. I don't know if you know the story of Jonathan and David.
No.
Yeah.
I don't.
Jonathan is David's protector in the Bible. And he helps him with his swords and his, because David is the one
Goliath.
who,
David
David throws the stone at the Goliath, right?
Yes.
And he gets injured, and that's Jonathan comes in and takes care of him. So I've, you know, I didn't write that. I didn't write that, but here I am, Jonathan and David. David is very sick. We're sick, and here I am, not sick, to take care of him. So you do the math there, you know. But yet I question. I go to I say, why? Why do you do this to people? What are we supposed to learn from it? And the joy, I guess, what you talked about earlier, is being able to help. You know, someone like David, you know. And the priorities and things shifted, you know, when all that started happening. So a show I didn't care about a show, really, to be honest with you. You know, how do I get him better? How do I get him up? How do I have him, you know, walk through life holding his head up? So I don't know if that sort of interrelates to that. So
yeah, of course. What do you think in that regard about where in this physical world, in this scientific world where everything needs explanation, where we are treated as maths many times by the system, we're data basically instead of individuals. So what's your take on other type of holistic healing, and are you incorporating any of that in your daily lives with your situation?
Exactly. Yes, we are. We have some very good friends who are practicing holistic medicine and treatments, and we rely heavily upon them. You know, we go up to a certain point, and then I say to David, I say, okay, we're not going to mix that brew, because I just don't think that that's something that you can tolerate. But certainly look at acupuncture and look at mind, body, spirit connection in terms of healing. So in answer to that question, we do not only practicing obviously Eastern medicine, but also Western medicine, but also Eastern practices. But we go up to a certain point. You know, I have a friend who does. You know, she puts all the things together and mixes it. And, oh, Dave, I don't know about that. let's be careful. Drinking that potion. You know, so but we do work with them very closely, actually. So yeah, massage therapy.
And do you think the mind has the ability to heal itself?
Yes.
And
I think the body may not,
to make
but
you
the mind.
sick. Yeah.
Sure. I said to David, David, you've got to get your brain, you know, literally into a headspace that you know, you're not necessarily going to beat cancer, but you can certainly live with it. And thank God we are in a time frame where
There's information.
I don't know if any of you are experiencing this or have experienced it, but the scientific, it's amazing what they're doing. I'm like, good God, whereas opposed to 15 years ago, 10 years ago, done, out in the box. And this is, I'm like, God, how do you do this? And it's like really within like little millimeters and degrees, and it's amazing to me. But I will tell you this. At one point in time during David's care, this doctor lowered his glasses to me and said, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Of course you can." He goes, "What do you do that you are asking me such intricate questions? Because in all the years I've been practicing oncology, no one has asked me these types of questions." And I said, "Sir, sit down. Let me tell you what I do." I said, "I'm going to question every word that comes out of your mouth, every acronym, every syllable that I don't understand as a human being. And I need you to explain them to me like you're explaining them to your mother." And he was like, I get it. And I said, no, you don't, but I'm going to make sure you get it. And they were very, yeah, I've dubbed myself the crazy lady in the hallway, you know. So, yeah, I really am. You know, I'm like, no, this is not.
It's like that Uta Hagen in you with the comma. Why is this comma here? And then
well, I didn't want to go into that explanation because he had no idea who Uta Hagen was. They would, you get it. Yeah, I was like, yeah. It's funny you say that because in my brain I'm thinking, should I do the Uta Hagen story to him? And he was like, no, I don't think I should. So anyway.
But you know what's beautiful? It's coming from love.
Yes.
And it's because of love. And everything you're doing. And that's something
I know.
You know, I noticed that from the first time we had a conversation, how much love you have and how much you're given to David, to your art, to your passion, to the projects you want to bring to the table. You know?
I really, you know, I've been blessed because I've been able to keep a roof over my head in a very challenging career.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and done something sort of okay with it, you know. My name's on a wall somewhere. I've been given a couple of ribbons and this, that, and the other thing. And that's wonderful to be recognized that way. I still have goals I want to achieve, but yeah, it's I'm blessed to be able to do what I do and to do it on a level that I do it at. So, you know.
Do you think, let me ask you this very crazy question, but do you think love heals?
And it can also hurt. So yes.
Do you think it has that power?
Sure.
It could heal, it could destroy, it could, you know, it could transform.
Sure. All of the above. All of the above. It's I can only tell you what, and I quote, here I go with another quote. Rodgers and Hammerstein, South Pacific. And I mean this with all sincerity. You have to be carefully taught to love or to hate. So whatever your generation comes down from, you know, even your first generation or maybe your, however far you want to go back, you have to be carefully taught to love or to hate. And you know, I came from a loving family, disciplined, no question, no question. And before I was to do theater, I had to get my books done, my school. That was the law. They said you cannot take one rehearsal unless you finish all of your homework, you do all of your. So the discipline was immediately put into my understanding. Okay, I've got to discipline myself to do this so I can do that. But yeah, the love, you know, for me, my mother said, "There's the basement. Go and have fun. Go and here's the paint. Here's the sparkle. Here's the fabric. Go play. Go and play." And so that's love, you know, because they didn't say no, don't do it. They said, yeah, you can do it, but you got to do this first before you do that. So yeah, so our imaginations were just enticed that way, you know. They're both educators too, you know. They're both teachers, so they had that sensibility.
Jonathan, can I ask?
You can ask anything.
This is a big question, but your overarching life, everything you've been through AIDS pandemic, you had this career in theater, you're now taking care of your partner. What is your takeaway? What is your theme or takeaway about life? What is this life taught you?
Again, I quote what the Professor Marvel said to the Tin Man. It's not how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. So whatever I do in my life, that is my guiding my guiding principle.
North Star.
Pardon me?
That's your North Star.
Yeah. You know, I'm a good person. I may be crazy at times, you know, but who isn't? You know, and you know, David will tell me, "Oh my God, you're so strict," you know. I was like, "No, David, we have to get this done before we can get that done. You know, we've got to look at the map before we know where we're going." You know, and he's like, "No, let's just go free." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, we can do that, but I still want a destination." You know, so I have my idiosyncratic moments, I guess, but I was so confused about that too when the Tin Man, when that came up in the film. I was like, I don't understand that. I don't understand that. But when my mom passed away, I understood it. And I was like, oh, this is because she was so loved by, an incredible field of her colleagues and her co-workers. They actually built a park for her. Yeah, in her honor.
But I think if you love like well, and if you love a lot, you're gonna be loved anyway. So it's like it's directly proportional.
It's not how much you love, but how much you are loved by others. That's the reciprocity.
Yeah. There's feedback in
That's
there.
that's the cyclical moment. What I give out and you give back. You know,
here's the yin and the yang.
You get
the
out,
yin and the
you put
yang.
it
The yin and the yang.
Right.
It's just like this equilibrium. You know, like it's part of that.
If you and I think we've all met people who are dissatisfied in life or have troubling situations that they bring into their daily existence. And I go, my God, life is too short. Life is way too short. So I can make the choice not to, indulge in that.
So Jonathan, can you tell us what you're cooking up next, what you're excited about?
Yes, sure, of course. Thank you. I'm working on a new musical, which is Theater for Young Audience, which I went back to the producer of it and I said, so I'm going to give you my takeaway on Theater for Young Audience, that unless the world stops having children, you will never not have an audience for this. So this is a very successful business model that you can work with. If I ever told you 5 years ago that I'd be doing Theater for Young Audience, I thought you would have two heads on your shoulder. But now that I'm looking at it and see the importance of this genre, I embrace it quite wonderfully, and so I'm working on this Mr. Puppy, it's called. And Mr. Puppy goes around the world and meets all different types of cultures and different types of people, and we're literally in pre-production for that right now. So that's hot on my plate, and I've got two other readings that I'm working on, and I'm in discussion with 2 other projects for the fall. So yeah. Like I said to you earlier, I was like, how does it all coming at me? It's happening really fast. So I embrace it. So
that's where they can find.
So, and where can people find you? Are you on social media, website?
Yep. You just key my name into Google and it'll all come up, Jonathan Cerullo. My website is jsctheatricals.com. But yeah, I have to tell you this funny story. When I was working with a group of high school students, this kid comes up to me and he talks to me and he goes, I Googled you last night. And it was before Google really had anything to do. I was like, you did what to me last night? And he goes, I Googled you last night. And he goes, you worked with the circus. And I said, yeah. I said, how did you find that out? And little did I know what this internet search, what do you call it? Tool. Yeah. So literally you key my name in and it just comes up with pages.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, this is a lot of stuff. So crazy. But yeah, that's where they can find me. And then I'm on Facebook and all that other stuff. Yeah.
Jonathan, we have what I call a ritualistic question that we ask to all our guests. And this is now your time. What is the soul? How do you define the soul?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And you know what? I actually wrote something down, but I left it at the apartment. It is a connection of mind, body, and spirit. And when that trifecta comes together, that is the soul. My mind, and it changes. The dynamic of that changes. But at the end of the day, I do hope my soul is transported to some other young kid out there who loves musical theater as much as I did. So that's my soul.
Just the same way your grandmother has that to you.
Exactly. That's the soul right there. I looked it up actually what the word soul meant, and it means the definition of mind, body, and spirit.
Wow.
Yeah, that connection. Yeah. I know I wrote it down. I forgot to bring it with me. So it's a crazy day with my oven not coming. So
It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You guys are great for doing
Thank
this.
you for being here.
Yeah. What an incredible journey, that you want to look into all this. No one's ever asked me these questions before. I mean, it's always like, tell us about your show. Okay, I'll do that. But no one's really stopped to ask
We
about.
got that twice today.
Yeah, that's right. We've done it a few times because we want to learn about a person's life and their experiences. Your experience will inform you about what you believe, and maybe we can learn that, and maybe audiences can learn that.
And I also have to say, in my craft, I had the great opportunity to work with a very, very big director choreographer. And when she called me, actually, she says, I'm looking for an assistant. I hear you're good. I'm taking you out of the chorus because you're too good to be in the chorus. And I was like, do I think it is? I mean, this was a woman who I'd idolized for years. And somebody referred me to her. And the minute she called me and she was like, I got a job for us to do, I hung up my toe shoes. I said, I'm not going to perform anymore. And I literally left that. Literally, I said, I have one show to do, one show to finish, and then I'm all yours. And I spent the next 13 years working with this woman in the trenches.
Wow.
In the trenches. And I always say to her, when you come into the space, Pat, it's Patricia Birch. I don't know if you know the movie Grease. That's Pat. Yeah. She's my dear, she's my mentor. And so I say, you are right here, Pat. You come into the room with me. And I actually talk like you when I'm in the room. And I say phrases like you in the room. I said, so your legacy continues right through me. So I just saw her last week. She's 96 years old.
Wow. It's wonderful. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, boy, I learned through her.
To have a mentor and a friend that way.
And we are in a mentoring profession. So now I have the ability to have assistants, and I say to them, here's the tools you need. So you talk about passing it on. That's that's concrete evidence right there. So totally. So
wow.
Yeah, Pat Birch.
Wow. Incredible.
Fun stuff. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
When is this going to be showing? What can I see it? Can I splash it all over?